Well, hello, class. This week we are going to talk about culture. And probably throughout this entire course, culture is going to be one of the most important things that we're going to discuss. Culture is everything in an organization. And if we have a better understanding of culture, we really want to look at all of the different dimensions of culture, differentiating between organizational and national culture, reviewing the purpose of culture, and exploring how a culture is built and sustained. Our understanding of culture is informed by many different types of disciplines. And these disciplines provide insight into the three dimensions of culture: artifacts, espoused values, and basic assumptions build cultures. Cultures, both national and organizational, serve a number of important functions. They do this by establishing rules and defining what is legitimate and illegitimate behavior. Other organizational applications of culture include rewards, punishments, selections, training, motivation, and organizational strategy. When we talk about assumptions, assumptions often include beliefs about reality, such as events that can be rational and fair, are random and unpredictable. The second thing is the nature of time. The focus of attention is on short term events or long time frame. The next one is space. The world is vast and diverse, or small and similar. The next one is human nature. People are naturally motivated or need incentives to work hard. And five, the next thing, the final thing, interpersonal relationships. Fellow employees can be friends, or should they be professional and distant type of relationships? So here again, we have a lot of choices, and we can make assumptions on either or. Now, we talked about values before. A lot of assumptions that we make are based on our values. So we ask ourselves, what is the purpose of culture? Culture, whether it be national or organizational, serve a number of important psychological and social functions. When we get into international cultures, and we've talked about those before in global types of relationships, international functions now become very, very important because we're dealing with different customs and laws and ways of doing things. Culture established limits of acceptable behavior. and defines what is legitimate and illegitimate behavior. Culture also sets the ground rules for what constitutes appropriate punishment when rules are broken, and what kinds of rewards are given when people follow the rules. If we look at things from an organizational perspective, culture helps guide the selection and training of employees who we feel are going to be a good fit for the organization. Culture motivates people by providing a shared identity among organizational members and also fulfills a human need for belonging and identity. In some cases, culture could support organizational strategies and effectiveness. Culture helps an organization understand what goals to set, which behaviors are important, and what standards are acceptable. And finally, how do we how do we allocate resources within a culture? We're going to talk this week about Hofstede's 5 dimensions of organizational culture. And that's going to include power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, and finally, long-term orientation. There are 5 things. And we are going to look at the 7 areas of Henry Mintzberg's model that links organizational culture to strategy. A little bit of history about Mintzberg. He was a management professor and a consultant. And he developed a model that links an organization's culture to its strategy. Often, organizations struggle to balance 7 distinct, what we call organizational subcultures. When a single subculture predominates, the subculture begins to influence the organization's overall strategy. The entrepreneurial culture predominates in startups, turnarounds, new ventures, and other situations where you need strong vision and direction. The dominant culture force directs the future position of the organization, even if the organization has not currently proven itself. The next thing is what we call the machine culture. The machine culture predominates in production plants and manufacturing and service organizations, such as banks. For example, banks require clear procedures in order to maximize their efficiencies. So here, the subculture dominant value is efficiency. And how the organization achieves its direction is by focusing on controlling costs and benefits, creating economies of scale, building in, at the same time, standardized practices and procedures that contain costs. So that's the bank. The proficiency culture is going to rely on the knowledge, skills, and training of the organization's members and is likely going to flourish in hospitals. That's where, like the pandemic that we're going through now, all right, proficiency culture is extremely important. You need protocol, you need what to do, knowing this in an environment that requires it. Others are accounting firms and other types of professional service firms. The dominant value here is going to be professionalism, which covers autonomy, so individual professionals are required to exercise independent judgments and make them when they have to. And then we have the concentration culture. And the concentration culture values the ability to serve particular markets, customers, or constituents, I can never say it, constituencies. The primary value in diversification is, the primary value here is diversification. So specific markets, such as like consumer products that develop specific products for hair, care soaps, etc., can be served. Like right now, we need a lot of sanitizers, sterilizers, and protections. The innovative culture values the ability to discover new ways of doing things, like the research we're doing to come up with a vaccine for this pandemic. And then we're living all differently now, social distancing and so forth. So we're adapting to change. That's becoming or turning into a new and different culture. And discover better ways of achieving goals that we used to achieve in different types of methodologies. So the primary value is the innovation culture. And that values temporary groups like task force that get together to complete short-term project focused on short-term goals and develop new solutions. Hence, we have task force to try to keep on top of this pandemic and flattening the curve. Then finally, we have the cooperation culture. And those values are pulling together of ideologies, building strong cultures, developing norms, beliefs, and sharing common values. The main value is ideology, as demonstrated by religious groups in ideological or political campaign or not-for-profit organizations. And there is one more, that's the competitive culture, or the competition culture. That describes a culture that has difficulty maintaining internal cohesion within the organization. Power is distributed throughout the organization rather than being centralized. Politics, the fight for power, is the predominant value in the competitive culture, since there is no central direction and little agreement among members of the organization or desire to compromise. So pretty much this ends phase one. It's a little bit lengthy, but it goes into all the different types of cultures and the explanation to that. So I want you to reflect about 15 minutes or so on what I just lectured on.